Hello, everybody. Apologies for the delay in starting this webinar today. We had a few technical issues. Today's webinar is one of a series of webinars that ACTU is carrying out. My name is Dr. Maya Juice, and I'm going to be moderating today's webinar. Our topic today is exploring AAC for individuals who present with profound and multiple learning disabilities. And we really appreciate that people have taken the time out to listen to this today. A few housekeeping things. Firstly, this webinar will be in English. You can use closed caption setting if you would like to see text to help you to understand what is being said. This is a recorded session and eventually will be on YouTube. If you have any questions or that you would like to ask, you can use the Q&A symbol to write your question, and I will be looking at those. It might be that I'll answer some myself, or there might be others that I will say let's have a discussion at the end of the webinar. We have two presenters today. Our first presenter is Jamie Side, and she's a speech and language therapist for ACTU. And she'll be followed by Theodora Alexic, another speech and language therapist also who works with ACTU. So I'm just going to hand over to you, Jamie.
Okay, all right. So thank you, May, for that very nice introduction. And so yes, as May just mentioned, today's topic is about AAC and people who have PMLD. You'll find that it's a very interesting topic, because I myself find it to be very interesting and quite underestimated actually. But before we start delving into the presentation, let's have a look at today's agenda. So we're going to start by defining PMLD. So what is PMLD exactly? We are aware that maybe some individuals in the audience are not exactly comfortable or are not exactly entirely familiar about PMLD. And so we're going to be giving a definition about that. Then we're going to be delving into very interesting topics of pre-intentional communication and intentional communication. At that point, we're going to start to learn how these individuals communicate, okay? Then the next part would be a bit more practical and hands-on, basically, where we're going to be talking about different types of AAC for these individuals, as well as strategies. And finally, at the end, we'll have some time for questions. Okay, so before we continue on to this presentation, we would like to get to know the audience a bit better so that we can see exactly who it is we are dealing with. So for the next 10 minutes, I'm going to ask you to access a link on Menti so that you can answer some questions for us. So I'm going to stop. Okay. And I'm going to share. Okay. Can someone please confirm? Is everything working? Thanks, May. Okay, so you should be seeing a question in front of you. So we are not looking for anything major, anything bold, or anything technical from your end, okay? We would just genuinely like to know what comes to mind when you think of PMLD. So the concept of PMLD, have you heard of it? Do you know what it is? Have you worked with PMLD? What have you learned so far about working with children with PMLD or individuals or adults with PMLD? We would just really like to know. As soon as you type in your answers, we should be receiving a word cloud of all the answers that should come up. So let's just give some time for people to get to think a little bit and to get acquainted and familiar with this. So let's see. Let's wait a bit more. All right. Okay, finally. All right, so we have the word multiple disabilities. Indeed, yes. Okay, they're coming in now. So multiple disabilities, I see intellectual disabilities, physical disabilities, yes, sensory, visual impairment, technology, wheelchair, I see wheelchair there, cognitive, very interesting, physical, hearing loss, yes, multidisciplinary teams, very interesting. Let's see if, non-verbal, yes. Okay. Anyone else, maybe? You're still in time to submit your answers. Profound difficulties. Social, I love that word. That's a very, very good word. AAC, obviously. No specific knowledge. That's very, very good, actually. That's good to know. Thank you for coming forward. Challenging. Very, very, very good. Okay, let's see. Preverbal, yes. We are going to be mentioning the word preverbal quite a lot. Big Mac, yes, you'll hear about that for sure from Theodora. Complex, definitely complex, yes, I understand that. Okay, all right. Developmental delay, yep. Behavior difficulty, that's a good one. Independence, love it. Family challenges, that's very good. Cause and effect, for sure. We will be talking about cause and effect and the importance of cause and effect when working with individuals with PMLD. Right in the middle, we have communication, which is obviously very, very, very important. Okay, let's just wait a little bit more so that maybe whoever just joined can give us their answers. But I really like the feedback and the words that are coming up. So, right to make a choice. That's brilliant. Okay. Dependent. All right. Okay. All right. We seem to have very, very, very good answers, actually. And I think you'll find now that in some way or another, hopefully this presentation would have at least targeted a few of these things that you have mentioned, because we are going to touch upon almost all of the things mentioned here. So very good. Okay. All right, let's move on to the other one. So I'm going to turn to the next question. There's another question. So next question would be, all right, coming right up. So have you ever worked with AAC and PMLD? Have you ever seen someone with PMLD who uses some form of AAC? We are going to be defining what AAC here is okay, so don't worry about that. But just like to give you in a nutshell, so anyone who is using other means to communicate, obviously other than speech, okay? So that is what AAC is in a nutshell. 4 yeses. That's good. Let's see if we have any no's. 5 yeses. Let's wait a bit more. All right, we have 1 no. I hope whoever answered no, I hope you'll manage to get something really good out of this presentation. Okay, so. Okay, we seem to have quite a number of people who have worked with individuals with AAC and PMLD. That's very, very good to see. All right, let me just give a couple of more seconds and we'll start with the presentation. Okay. All right, so we have 9 there, 10 for yes, and 3 for no. All right, okay, so let me stop sharing. That's very good feedback, actually. And I'm going to return to my presentation, okay? Oh, we have another question. Thea just reminded me that we have another question. So, thank you, Thea. I'm gonna present, and I'm going to share again. Okay. All right, so next question we would like to know. Okay, so this, I believe this is another word cloud. How confident do you feel supporting someone with PMLD? So to answer this question, you're going to have to access the second link, okay? Because we sent you two Menti links. So this you can access it with the second link. All right, so let's just give some time for people to tell us how confident they feel when it comes to supporting someone with PMLD, okay? So when we're talking about supporting, it doesn't have to necessarily mean in terms of communication and AAC, okay? It can be in more general. So please let us know. Not confident at all, had no training. Okay, anyone else who would like to give us their opinions about this? It's not easy, I agree. It's not easy, yes. Not a lot. Okay, anyone else? Let's just wait a little bit more for people who have just joined or for people who are still trying to think of their experience when working with someone with PMLD. Keep in mind, it doesn't have to be a child, it can be an adult. So keep it in mind. Not very confident, but would love to learn more about it. Thank you for your answer. I hope you'll manage to learn something. Not very confident, okay? I'm scared I'll not know the right thing or confuse the learner. Had no training, not very confident. I worked with anyone with PMLD, but I believe that you need to, okay, I need to scroll down. But I believe that you need to adopt a holistic approach. Very interesting answer. Okay, and someone else said, not very confident as there is lack of awareness and training provided. I agree. It's one of the reasons why we decided to choose today's topic to be PMLD, because yes, we do agree that there is there's room for more training and awareness. I agree. Okay. All right, so, okay, the last one. It is quite challenging for people who is very limited with communication. Yes, that's true. Yes, that is true. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and time for the presentation. So, share. Okay. All right, everything okay? Can you confirm? Can anyone confirm? All right. Okay, so let's start with the definition of PMLD, okay? So for anyone who is not exactly familiar of what PMLD is and what it entails, basically, okay? So when we are talking about PMLD, we are talking about someone who has profound cognitive limitations in addition to sensory and or physical disabilities, okay? We already saw that from our activity on Menti here in the word cloud, and there were various disabilities mentioned there, and all were very valid. So basically, I mean, PMLD is a term that encompasses a range of conditions and level of severity. Okay, so we are talking about someone who has a lifelong condition, because I think that's very, very important to mention, and that it is not exactly an illness or an official like diagnosis, but rather it's a collection of different disabilities altogether. You might also encounter the term high support needs, or sometimes even complex communication needs, but here we like to use the term PMLD. Okay, so when we are talking about PMLD, we're talking about IQ here that is usually not higher than 20, okay? It is multifaceted, obviously, and pervasive, and as I mentioned before, it requires lifelong support. By multifaceted here, again, I'd like to stress that we are talking about intellectual disabilities and a number of other disabilities, okay? And the last thing that I'd like to mention is that they do have the capacity to participate in everyday life, so they must be provided with the right opportunities, okay? While I was doing some research on this topic, I came across some stats from Scotland, which I would like to share, as I think they are very, very interesting. So the stats I found were from 2012 and were found in Scotland. Okay, so we are talking about Scotland here. So in 2012, 26,236 adults with learning disabilities were known to local authorities across Scotland. And in terms of estimate, it is estimated that around 20 in every 1,000 individuals present with mild to moderate learning disabilities. Okay, so let's just put that out there. And something interesting else I found coming from the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists, basically. They also state something very, very similar to what Scotland have found. Yes, it was something I didn't know, I must admit. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. We have mentioned that PMLD comes with a number of disabilities, but what exactly are we talking about here? So aside from the obvious one here, which is difficulty in communication, okay? But the most significant one would be the intellectual disability, okay? But we can see that they present with physical disabilities, so this limits them in undertaking everyday tasks, and they often restrict mobility, okay? We often see someone who has PMLD, we often see them, for example, using a wheelchair. All right, then the next one we have sensory impairment. So many a times they have sensory impairments, for example, related to vision or even related to hearing, which obviously makes the case a bit more complicated. And we encounter sensory processing difficulties as well. Other complex health needs, okay, so other complications, you might find someone who suffers as well from epilepsy, respiratory problems, dysphagia, which is basically a problem with eating and drinking and swallowing, basically. Coping behaviors, which may present as challenging, obviously, because of their lack of means of communication, and sometimes even mental health difficulties, okay? All right. So next one. Okay, so today's topic is about PMLD, but I really felt that in order to properly understand PMLD and in order to properly understand how they really communicate, I felt I had to go back to the basics, okay? So let's talk about pre-intentional communication for a second, okay? Which is the early stage of communicative development and the precursor to intentional communication, which we're going to tackle soon. You might also come across this term as unintentional or pre-verbal or pre-language skills, okay? So here we are talking about a set of skills that are present in a baby, basically. So that's why, hence the picture of a baby, okay? So before words develop, a number of skills first have yet to develop in a child. Okay, so let's have a closer look at them. All right, first, and I feel that this diagram here, taken from a very good book called, I believe it's called Language Builders for Complex Needs. Okay, you have the authors there down at the bottom. I think this is a very good summary of what pre-intentional communication is. Okay, so let's start with the text where mom enters the room, and there we have the baby. Okay, so the mom says hello, and the child hears the mom says hello. He smells the mom. Okay, and he might see her. He registers that into his memory. He reacts. Probably he will smile or make a facial expression of some sort. The mother in turn reacts to that, and for example, by giving an even bigger smile. Okay, and she would be, in that way, she would be reinforcing that behavior. Okay, she might say, oh look, he's saying hello, for example. Okay, so she reacts to the baby, and she probably picks him up, okay, to hold him. So this would be another reward. Okay, all right, so just to continue on pre-intentional communication, I think it's safe to say that at birth, babies are termed unintentional or pre-intentional communications. Okay, so when they cry, they cry when they are hungry, and they cry when for example they are wet and they need a nappy change. Okay, but they don't do this in a way that they in some form, shape or other they're expecting an answer from the mother. Okay, they just do that because they are feeling uncomfortable at that point. Okay, then comes in the adult carer or the mother or the father, whoever, and they assign meaning to the baby's cries. Okay, so if the baby's crying because he's hungry, and the mother will respond by giving him milk, for example. Okay, so she's identifying the problem and she's providing the solution and comfort to it. Okay, so the baby is fed, and they will stop crying. Okay, at this point, I think it would be very safe to say that the adult is solely responsible for interpreting the baby's vocalizations and responses during this period. Okay, so in this process, the baby is learning that when he or she makes a sound, okay, someone is responding to their sound. Okay, this is very early signs of intentional communication. All right, and just to give you a rough idea, this usually happens around 6 months of age. Okay, just a rough idea. Okay, so moving on to the next part before actual intentional communication is developed. Okay, so here we have the anticipation event. All right, so let's start again with mom entering the room, and the mother says hello. Again, the child hears, smells, and sees the mom. Okay, this time, because this event has happened more than once, and he would have stored it into his memory. He remembers previous events. Okay, so he moves in anticipation of being picked up. Okay, and he might vocalize as well, or maybe might kick his legs. Again, the mother gives an even bigger smile and might say hello and reward that behavior, and the baby is rewarded by a cuddle. Okay, so here we can see the difference from this to the previous one. We can see a certain anticipation in the baby. Okay, all right, so let's, I skipped. Okay, so basically, in a nutshell, okay, of what pre-intentional communication is, we like to refer to it as something which is non-symbolic. Okay, so it's something that involves things like gestures, facial expressions. I think it's very safe to say that it relies heavily on the partner's knowledge. Parents out there, I think, can especially relate to this, when it's like when only you know what exactly is wrong with your baby or with your child. There is, at this point, there is no understanding that actions have consequences, okay? So the baby at this point is not realizing that their action, whatever they're doing, is causing something else to happen, okay? So here we are referring to specifically what we call cause and effect, okay? Which you guys actually mentioned in the word cloud, all right? So just to give you a bit of a summary of what cause and effect is because it's a very, very important skill. Basically, cause and effect is when something happens in reaction to something else, okay? So it's a combination of action reaction kind of thing. I think if you really think about it, I think we can safely say that communication is a cause and effect phenomenon, okay? So we are talking, we are communicating with someone, and we are getting something back in return, okay? Maybe a more practical example I can give of cause and effect is, for example, when we present babies with a pop-up toy, for example, they press something and something pops up, okay? That is a very, very good toy to work on cause and effect, because at that point, we are teaching the baby, in this case, about their communication being given a purpose, okay? It's what we call causality. All right, so in that process, they are learning that certain behaviors trigger positive examples, okay? Trigger positive behaviors, okay? So intentionality, really and truly, can be seen as a step towards intentional communication. All right, okay, so let's move on now to intentional communication, okay, which is slightly more straightforward. Okay, so again, as you can see in the diagram above and the diagram in front of you, the mom enters the room, she hears hello, the baby hears her and smells her and sees her, he remembers previous event, and he can give a purposeful message at this point, okay? So they vocalize, again, they smile, they kick, they raise their chest, which clearly indicates, listen, mom, pick me up. The mother at that point might say, up, you want to come up? Okay, and she lifts the baby up as a reward, okay? So at that point there, we are starting to see intentional communication, okay? The baby here is realizing that whatever they are doing can have an impact on their communication partner, okay? All right, so okay, the next one is, so let's keep in mind what we learned about the development of a typically developing child, okay? And let's try and relate it to someone with PMLD now, because you might be saying, okay, why am I at a webinar of speaking about PMLD, and we are all of a sudden talking about normal developments in communication developments in babies? And I hope you will start to understand why in a minute, okay? All right, so let's just summarize what happened up to now. So we can say that communication involves the exchange of information between at least two participants. Okay, so in the images we saw previously, it was obviously between the baby and between the mother. Okay, so obviously communication always happens between two participants. All right. And exchanges are viewed in terms of their form, content, and use. Okay, this is a model by Bloom and Leahy, and although it goes back to 1978, it is a very good model to define what language is. Okay, so. If you look at those three intersecting circles, it clearly describes what they are about. And what I would like to place special emphasis on is on the content and form, okay? In this case, we're going to apply them to someone with PMLD. So when we have content, we are talking about word meanings, the way word meanings link together, sequencing, etc. It's about the meaning of a particular message, okay? So in the case of a baby, he's feeling hungry, so he will cry. Speaking of crying, let's move on to the form now. The form speaks about word order or word endings or speech. In the case of a baby, it's a cry. So he is communicating the content of his message through a cry. Okay, and I'm just going to mention use, but I'm not going to place special emphasis on this. Okay, so when it comes to use, we are more talking about pragmatics and the social use of language. Okay, so conversation, social cues, matching language to the situation. Okay, all right, so going back to PMLD and communication and how we can apply this to Bloom and Leahy's model. Okay, so when it comes to content, I think we can all agree that all individuals do have something to say, okay? So they do have something to communicate about. If we take an individual with PMLD who is maybe showing a certain facial expression of discomfort, or who is whining, or who's crying, that's a message in of itself. The difference here is that they are using the form in a different way, okay? So they are not using the conventional form that we know of, which is words in this case, but they are using, for example, crying or whining, okay? I really want to emphasize this now, that we are not in no way am I trying to compare for an adult or an individual with PMLD to a baby, okay? We are just using what we know about the developmental process, okay, to help us understand how best to support these adults, okay? So, and to see where at what communication stage they have reached, okay? Because through this we can identify the goals and see what works best for them. All right, so next one, which is my last slide. All right, so PMLD and communication, okay? Let's see what we have learned so far. So many people with PMLD, you will probably relate now. So to someone, if you're working with someone with PMLD, you will probably relate to this. Many people with PMLD rely on facial expressions, vocal sound, body language, and behavior to communicate, okay? So probably while I was reading this, you hopefully were thinking of someone you work with, or your child or your daughter or son, who uses facial expressions or sounds to communicate, to tell you his message or her message, okay? Some people may use a small range of formal communication, such as speech, sound, symbols, or sounds, okay? Their form of communication might be through speech, symbols, or sounds. But there are others who may not have reached the stage of using intentional communication, okay? And they may rely on others to interpret their actions to events and people. This links us back to pre-intentional and the diagram we saw with the babies, okay? Where the mother was the person responsible for interpreting the behavior of the baby, okay? And finally, it is very important that those who support people with PMLD spend time getting to know their means of communication, okay? So how are they showing that they are hungry? How are they showing that they are in pain? How are they showing that they need to be changed, for example, okay? And hopefully we can find effective ways to interact with them. All right, so from my end, I can conclude here, because what's coming next is Thea's presentation, who will help us put all this knowledge into practice by giving us ideas for AAC and strategies that we can use with these type of individuals. So from my end, I'm going to give the floor to May back again, who will be introducing Theodora, okay?
Unmute my mic. Okay, everybody. So thank you, Jamie, for a really interesting presentation. It's very nice to hear what we can expect when somebody is described as having PMLD. I thought this one. Right, anyway, next we're going to have Thea, and she's going to refer us more to the practical aspect of how we can implement AAC with this client group. I would like to say to you that we apologise for some technical issues that we have been having, and Thea has moved to a different Wi-Fi in the hope that we won't have these problems for her presentation. I can also remind any questions about what Jamie or Thea are saying, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box and we will do our best to answer them. Thank you.
Okay, hello. I'm not sure if my presentation is showing. Okay. So in this part of the webinar, we'll be going through some different types of AAC that are commonly used with individuals with complex communication needs. So AAC refers to any strategies, tools, communication devices, and systems that help to support or replace the natural speech of an individual who has difficulties communicating. And there are different types of AAC. There are no or low-tech AAC, there is mid-tech AAC, and there is high-tech AAC. For today's webinar, we will mostly be focusing on low-tech and mid-tech AAC, as these are usually recommended for clients with PMLD. So now we shall be talking about objects of reference. An object of reference is an object that has a particular meaning. For example, you can have a toilet roll, which may be associated with going to the bathroom. A client may have a toy desk, which may represent that it's time to work, and they can have a ball, which may be associated with playtime. I'm going to be showing you a short video on objects of reference, which will help explain the concept a bit further. Okay, the video should be showing now.
Edward, let's play the ball. Okay, we're going outside. Yes, and go outside. You ready? Let's go outside. That's right, outside. Ready? Outside. Ready? Stand up. That's it, well done. Go outside. Fantastic. Outside. Thank you very much. There we go.
So as we saw in the video, the red ball that the caregiver presented to the child represents the word outside. So he showed him the ball and straight away he said outside and he started taking the child outside. Going through with the action straight after showing the object of reference is really important, as it helps strengthen the individual's understanding of and association of what the object means. In this case, ball means outside always. Okay, objects of reference can be used for various reasons. So they can be used to increase understanding. So they can help the individual with PMLD understand what is going to happen now or what's going to happen next. So for example, seeing that red ball on the table would prepare the individual mentally to know that, okay, so soon we're going to be going outside. It can also aid in choice making and increase independence. So for example, you could have a ball that means outside and crayon, which means drawing, and you could ask the individual, which one would you like? And they could choose between the ball and the crayon. That way they'd be making a choice and increasing. They'd realize that the object of reference is something that they are in control of as well. It's not just something that is being used to control them. And this way it's more likely to be successful in use. It can also be used to show a sequence of events, for example, such as a visual schedule is used to show what's going to happen now and what will happen next. The same could be done with the object of reference. You could have a ball and a cup, which will allow the individual to see that first it's time to go outside, and then after being outside, it's time for a snack. It also allows, it creates a bridge between understanding the meaning of an object to understanding photos, pictures, and symbols. So individuals with PMLD have difficulty with understanding what a photo or symbol may represent. So placing an object of reference next to a photo can help try and build this association between the object and the picture. So when choosing an object of reference, it is very important that the objects are chosen carefully, and you need to keep in mind the age of the user. So for example, using a ball for outside may be appropriate for a child, but it may be less appropriate for, let's say, an adult. Maybe for an adult, you could use a piece of material or maybe a toy coat, something similar. It's important that the size of the object is also taken into consideration. For example, if we go back to my previous example where I said a coat, if you use a large coat, it may be hard to carry around. And what happens if it's summer? You wouldn't have the coats. Nobody wears a coat in summer, usually in Malta at least. So you need to think about it, and it needs to be practical. So instead of using a coat, you could use a piece of material that would represent this coat so that the person can associate the object of reference to going outside. And also the meaning and the motivation for the activity that is being chosen. So it is more likely to succeed if the individual is interested in what is it's more, they're going to use the object of reference more if they are interested in what is being represented by the activity. And it is very important that the object of reference is shown every time the individual is to do the activity associated with the object. So if I know that we're going to go outside next, it is very important to take this ball and to show it to the child and say outside, so that they can make this association, that so the association sticks. So another form of AAC is using signing. If the individual with PMLD can make use of their hands, signing is a great way of AAC which can supplement verbal speech, and this can increase understanding. There are various forms of signing. There's Makaton, there's finger spelling, keyword signing, there's multi-sign language. As you can see in the picture, we have the multi-sign language alphabet. Signing allows an individual to be able to share their thoughts, their emotions, to share their choices. It also allows them to label objects, photos, pictures. They can take part in stories, they can take part in games and in songs. However, there is a disadvantage to signing, as the communication partners around the individual need to be trained in order to be able to understand and take part in a conversation. So therefore, there is the element of training the individual when it comes to signing and the people around him. If the individual with PMLD is able to recognize pictures and symbols, then a form of AAC that incorporates pictures and symbols may be considered. So pictures and symbols can help support communication, independence. They can increase choice making, involvement, and the individual's confidence as well. They can aid in literacy and learning. It gives the individual access to information, and it allows a form of creativity and self-expression. There are many different types of pictures and symbols that can be used. It all depends on the individual's abilities and cognitive abilities. So a picture conveys a lot of information at once. and its focus may be unclear, while a symbol focuses on a single concept usually. So symbols, and usually you can put more than one symbol together in order to build up more precise information. There are various symbol systems available, and each system has its own strengths and weaknesses, as everything else, obviously. And you may be wondering, okay, but how do you choose which symbol system you're going to pick for this client? This really depends on the individual with PMLD's needs. So what are they going to use the AAC for? How will they use it? And also on their individual abilities and capabilities. So now we can look at some examples. So we have true object-based icons here, as you can see in the picture. So it can be used with individuals who have a difficulty with understanding two-dimensional symbols. So they have a difficulty understanding photos. So in a true object-based icon, you would take a photograph and you would cut it exactly in the representation of the real object. So this could help increase understanding, as the person, when they're seeing the picture, for example, there's a picture of a burger here. When they're seeing the picture of the burger, they can see also the shape of the burger, which will help with their association of the object and the picture. Some more examples of pictures and symbol-based AAC. We have the communication book. So a communication book is a book filled with vocabulary, which is personalized to the individual's needs. So we would decide where this communication book will be used, because some people might not always use their AAC. It may be used in certain situations only. So in a communication book, the person would pick the page that they want to talk about, or what they want to talk about, and then they can point. For example, they can point to "I want water," to tell you that they are thirsty and they would like to drink. We also have PECs. I think a lot of people are familiar with PECs. And we have something similar to a communication book, but it's just one page. It's called a communication board. So another form of AAC are voice output communication aids. These are simple communication aids that will play a pre-recorded message. Some may allow for a single message to be played, while others may allow for multiple recordings, so multiple messages can be played. An example of a voice output communication aid is a Big Mac. This is very commonly used with individuals with PMLD, and in our word cloud in the beginning, someone did mention the Big Macs. So a Big Mac is a mid-tech AAC device which allows for a recorded message to be played, such as "I want a drink," and the person would press the switch and the message would play. In order to help increase understanding, a symbol card can be placed on top of the Big Mac, as you can see in the picture. And this will help the person with PMLD increase their association with what the message is which message is recorded on the Big Mac. Using simple switches or other cause and effect devices can help individuals with PMLD understand that their actions have consequences. So it's teaching intentionality. This can be a step towards helping the development of intentional communication that Jamie had mentioned previously. And this development of intentional communication and the use of switch-based interventions could eventually lead into more advanced AAC being used. So another example of a mid-tech AAC system is the GoTalk. The GoTalk is made up of a number of micro switches, And it allows for a recorded message in each cell. So as you can see in the picture, we have quite a few cells over there. And each cell represents a different picture, and you can change different overlays, so different sheets. So the client can have 3 or 4 different sheets that they can store and use depending on the situation and what they would like to say. This allows for more independence than the Big Mac, definitely, because it allows for more sentences to be made. It allows for creativity, and it doesn't make the person rely on using the device in just one single situation. They can use it in different situations. We have some more examples of mid-tech AAC. There's different switches. There's a QuickTalker, which is similar to the GoTalk. We have an iframe. So as you can see, there is various types of mid-tech AAC, and it all depends on the individual's abilities. So now we're going to be looking at some strategies for communicating with individuals with PMLD. A lot of people get the same thoughts as we saw also in the word cloud. So you might think, will I be able to understand the individual with PMLD? Will they be able to understand me? What will I do if it all goes wrong? What if we cannot understand each other? What if we don't find a way to communicate? These are all very common thoughts that pop up in people's minds when dealing with an individual with PMLD. One way of going about this would be to create a communication passport. So a communication passport is basically a booklet. Usually it has around 10 to 20 pages, and it provides information on the individual with PMLD. And the information is how to communicate with this person. So the communication passport can include information on the person, so the age, the name, their likes and their dislikes, important people in their life, the communication system, so which communication system do they use, how it works, what happens if it's not working, the individual's strengths and their weaknesses, specific goals that they might be working towards, how to help them. So if there's a communication breakdown, what can I do to help this individual understand me? Or if you notice that maybe they're being frustrated, or you see a tantrum coming on, a communication passport can also help with this, because it can provide you with strategies and information on how to soothe and calm the person. It is very important that the information in the communication passport is clear and concise. So you need to assume that the reader does not know the individual whatsoever. So the information needs to provide clear details about exactly what to do. And it's important that the communication passport is in first person. So I like, I dislike, my name is. So in this way, it is written in the perspective of the individual with PMLD, because after all, this is a booklet about them and about their life. And it's important to only include important information. It should be shared with anyone and everyone who comes in contact with the individual. This way, it would increase communication between everyone. And it's important to use simple language, and lots of photos, colors, and symbols can also be used. So now I'm going to be showing you a picture as an example of the communication passport. So as you can see in the picture, there's 3 things you need to know about me. And there's a lot of pictures. So there's running, there's sweets. It's all visual aids as well to help the reader as well as to help the individual with PMLD. There's also, when you speak to me, it helps. So this is exactly what we're talking about now. It's little tips on how to communicate with the person. So getting their attention, keeping things simple, using keywords, signs. It all really depends on the individual's needs. So we can look at some more strategies for communicating with individuals with PMLD. So we have create an appropriate communication environment. This means make sure that the place is quiet, that there is limited distractions, that the person is fully focused on what is happening around them, and that they are aware that you are communicating with them. It's also important to face your communication partner. It's important to take turns. This is like you're having a conversation with another individual. So it is important to give them time and to allow them to register what you asked them or what you told them, and allow them to organize their thoughts and use their communication aid in order to be able to answer. It is also important to use simple language, so use simple sentences with them rather than, if you're going to tell them a story, simplify it. If you need to interpret a message, so sometimes there is a breakdown of communication and you may not fully think that you understood what the person is trying to tell you, and you need to interpret this message. Make sure that you repeat the message back to the individual to check if you understood. It is very important to check back with the individual, because sometimes we might think we understood, but they are trying to tell us something completely different. It's also important to create communication temptations. So, for example, if you know that usually at around 12 o'clock it's lunchtime, and you know that this person gets hungry, rather than just going up to the person, to the individual, and giving them their food, you could wait a little and see if they would ask you. If they don't, you could ask them, do you want to eat? They can say yes or no, and then you can create another temptation. So what would you like to eat? Would you like to eat the crackers or the bread? This way, it is not only creating an opportunity for the person to communicate, but it is also creating it's creating an opportunity for them to communicate. It's also giving them more independence, because they're getting to choose, to make a choice between what they want. It's also important to just relax and have fun with the system. You can make comments, you can explore. You don't need to just constantly bombard the person with questions and get them to use the device. It's okay to just, you can use it yourself only to model. That way the individual with PMLD is looking at you use this device, and they're creating the association that they can use the device to communicate with you because they see you doing it as well. And it's important to have fun, make games, play, and remember that it is a learning process for everyone. It's a learning process for you, it's a learning process for the individual, and it's a learning process for all the other professionals that are involved. So now we would like to know a little bit more about what you got out of this webinar, and if you have any opinions or anything you'd like to share with us. So I think Jamie needs to share the presentation.
Yes, there. So share. Okay. All right. So before we move on to question time, okay? We just have one question we want you to answer. Okay. So could you just tell us one thing that you have learned from this webinar? If you want to tell us 2 or 3, go ahead. But at least one. If you just can tell us, listen, I found objects of references, for instance, very interesting, or I found Big Macs, or I found the way communication develops interesting, whatever, something which stood out to you, and something which you can take home with you at the end of the day as a learning experience. Okay, so we will just give a few minutes, and then we will proceed to answering some questions. Okay. All right, objects of reference, very good, and the range of technology. Yes, there is quite a range of technology. Thea mentioned mostly no-tech or low-tech and mid-tech, and obviously we were going a bit more high-tech, but we wanted to focus on things that we normally work with when it comes to individuals with PMLD. So voice output communication aids, the use of strategies like communication passports. But yes, I mean the range of technology is rather vast actually, and it's always changing, always growing. AAC techniques, that's very nice to see. A person-centered approach, very good. The development of speech, very good. Okay. Anyone else would like to tell us one thing they've learned? Technology. Very good. So you find that you've learned something about technology from this webinar. Let's just give a few more seconds for the people to answer us. Okay, communication passports. Okay. Communication passports are a very interesting strategy, I must admit. I feel that sometimes they are a bit overlooked, and they are very, very important when it comes to non-verbal children, especially PMLD. Anyone else who would like to tell us one thing they've learned from this webinar? Let's just give a few more seconds for people to answer us. And then we can move on to some questions. Okay, we can let me just remind you that you are still in time to ask us some questions, okay, through the Q&A symbol. Okay. All right. Okay, I mean, it's the answers are very interesting actually, because it covers this whole webinar, basically the development of speech that was covered by myself and other things that were covered by Theodora. So I'm very glad to see that at least some of you did manage to take home some very useful information. Okay. All right, so I think I can stop sharing at this point, and we can move on to answering some of your questions, which I believe May is going to help out with that.
Okay, I think we're back. I'm back again, and we have got quite a few questions for everyone to answer. So the first question, I'm going to put this to Jamie, right? And it was a question that was posted on the Q&A about how come children are not assessed for these things as early as a year? Bearing in mind that this is a question that we're asking about children who have profound and multiple disabilities. Jamie, would you like to answer that one?
Okay. All right. So quite a good question, actually. I mean, here at ACTU, we do hope that children are assessed as early as 1 year or even earlier, because I mean, it's very well known that the earlier the intervention, obviously, the better the outcome. And I think it applies to almost each and every case that we see here at ACTU, definitely. But I think when it comes to PMLD, I think one must bear in mind that given the complexity of the case and given the amount of comorbidities and issues that come with the condition. I think we must bear in mind that maybe some other things would perhaps be given a bit more of a priority. For example, it's quite well known that individuals with PMLD have medical problems. If I had to keep it strictly to speech therapists, the problem of dysphagia, for example, the problem of having a problem to swallow and drink liquids or solid foods. So that might be the case. That might be a case where, for example, that was given a priority rather than communication, because obviously when it comes to medical problems, one might view it as a bit more urgent, you know. So I mean that's one reason I can think of why children, why they haven't been given an assessment earlier. But I do, if any parents out there have any serious queries about their children's communication skills when it comes to PMLD, I do urge you to speak to your speech therapists. They, for sure, they would be able to give you very good guidance about this. I hope this answered your question in some way or form.
That's me. Thank you very much for that reply, Jamie. Really interesting perspective that, of course, with this group of individuals, that a lot of times medical and health needs are a priority. And for this reason, a lot of times they don't come into the system as early as they could. So I think the take-home message on that one is talk to your speech therapist. If you think that you are ready to start thinking about communication, talk to your speech and language therapist. And we're more than happy to accept referrals for children at a very young age here. Okay, a second question, and I'm going to ask you again about this, Jamie, right, is my child doesn't know how to make a choice. How can I create communication opportunities? How can I help my child to move on the journey of making choices? Okay.
All right, that's another very interesting question, which I get often, mostly from parents. Sometimes even from individuals working in schools. And what I particularly like about answering this question is that it applies to each and every child or individual when it comes to supporting their language development. So the answer that I'll be giving pretty much applies to any child, whether it's typically developing or PMLD or any other case, which is the big how do we create communication opportunities? Well, obviously, I think what I would start with is getting them engaged. Okay, so you would really want to get them engaged and get them focused when it comes to providing them with choices. And I think the next one then would be choosing what you're going to work with. Okay, so basically choosing the right motivators is what we call them. Sometimes I often encounter individuals who, for example, have troubles identifying these motivators, and sometimes I even get the responses, and they are not interested in anything. Many a times I don't believe that question, because I believe everyone has a motivator. Everyone has something that they are interested in. It could be food, they just like to eat. Could be a particular toy, could be a particular activity. So I think the first step towards creating choices and creating communication opportunities in general is choosing the right motivators for your child. So keep in mind, motivators change with every individual. So whatever motivates a particular child or a particular adult, if you have to speak about adults as well, might not necessarily be the same case for the other individual. So it really is not a one-size-fits-all when it comes to choosing motivators. But when it comes to using them, I mean, it's pretty much common across the whole board. So I think if I had to summarize that up, yes, I think I would place special emphasis on the types of motivators that are chosen for that particular individual. I think That would be very important. I'm just checking to see that I did answer the whole question. May, was there another part to it?
No, that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we have another question, and for this question, I am going to ask somebody quite special to join us. Our guest answerer here, Sharon Borch-Gembry, is going to answer this question because it's specifically about visual impairment. So the question we have here is, when a child has a visual impairment, we've been talking so much about symbols and putting these on our AAC devices, but what do we do when a child isn't able to see or has difficulties with vision? I'm asking Sharon to answer this because she's an occupational therapist and she can perhaps guide us a little bit in terms of her own knowledge on this.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sometimes when like the first thing and when we encounter children with visual impairment, the first thing we look into is obviously the level of visual impairment that they have. So obviously this would be an information that we get from the ophthalmologist, but also sometimes we get from this information. Sometimes apart from this information, also we observe the child and how they are behaving within their environment. So we know as well that there are some children with even adults with PMLD who have what is called cortical visual impairment. Just briefly describing this for who is not aware of this terminology, basically it is the eye is functioning well as a sensory system, but what the brain is receiving and how it's processing, there is the issue. It's about how the brain is interpreting that input that is coming from the eye. And obviously then we don't have the output of obviously the behavior in reaction to what the child is seeing around him. But for these children, we know that they have color preferences. They have they are attracted to movement, and so sometimes we try to observe these responses. Sometimes as well, for children with visual impairment, also we rely on their tactile system. So going to answer the question how they can access this is sometimes even on we kind of do tactile like labels, even labeling the Big Mac with tactile, for example, if it is for a particular song. Sometimes we give them choices with even songs they like so that they can choose from them. So for example, if it is Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, we create a star from corrugated paper, for example. Or maybe we associate, because then this is a level of association. Like for the food, we attach material, could be any material that one identifies, so it could be foil. And obviously then, as Jamie has discussed previously, language is cause and effect. So whenever we are now, like if you have a child who is, you're trying to teach him how to request for food, and you're presenting the Big Mac in that situation, like for example, we say you have a child who is non-verbal, but I know as you as parents, as carers that you work, you notice that he needs food because maybe he's moving his mouth. At that time, you present the Big Mac with the tactile input, and obviously you facilitate pressing the Big Macs. By time, they start to associate that feeling with food. So that is one way of doing. Another way is also to go to these attributes. So if I have a child who I'm noticing that the color red is something that they are really interested, that they tend to track it. So then we maybe use even visuals that have maybe much more prominent in red, or even we use the Big Macs comes in various caps of colors, and we use that color particularly. We also use what we call contrast. So sometimes we print visual with on black background and then with more like in order to create this contrast. Obviously, then we decide according to the client we have in front of us. But these are some strategies that sometimes we use in order to help children with visual impairment to access as well AAC. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Sharon. That's really interesting on how we can actually individualize our AAC systems according to the needs of the child. The next question I have is for Taya. We've been asked about where we can actually find resources when it comes to communication passports.
Yes, I can send a link to one of the places where you can find a template. It's not, there isn't one template that fits all. You can make it yourself. You can make it in Microsoft PowerPoint. It's just important that you follow the rules that I had mentioned, where the language is simple and that it is precise information on the individual themselves. So what they like, what they don't like, how to help them, how to communicate with them. Those are the most important things. But I have sent sent a link. I'm not sure if you can see it in the chat to our website.
No. Yes. Okay. Thanks very much for that, Taya. Yes, the link that Taya has posted comes from Scotland, and they are the people that first came up with the concept of communication passports. So if you want to know a lot more about communication passports, that's the place to go. And we do have a couple of templates as well. Now, one final thing now. So it's for Taya. If there's one thing that you would say is probably really important with this client group, what would you give parents and teachers as a strategy when it comes to supporting communication?
Thank you for the question. I think that if there's one take-home message, the most important thing is remember to wait. So wait, and wait. Give them time, plenty of time to process what you said. Give them plenty of time to react to what was said and to be able to process their thoughts and to be able to press the switch or the device that they are using.
Thank you. Thanks very much for that answer, Taya. Completely agree with you, because this is a group of children or adults who maybe take a while to be able to respond, and waiting is the best thing that we can do. I would like to thank everybody who attended this webinar today. Thank you so much for taking the time out to listen to this. We do have one more webinar coming up this year in September, where we'll be talking more specifically about setting of goals and assessment and goal setting for individuals who use AAC in a more general sense. Thank you very much.